July 18, 1979, Warren Matott reported his wife, Sandra Matott, missing. He claimed she was last seen 8 days earlier in a bar in Salt Lake City. But police say family members believe by that point, Sandra had actually been missing much longer than what her husband was claiming. After Warren reported his wife missing, he basically stopped cooperating, and so detectives were never able to follow up with him. A month later, on August 19th, skeletal remains were found by a hunter named Leonard Watts in Millard County near the I-15 Cove Fort exit near a road called Old 91. She became known as the Millard County Jane Doe after investigators were unable to determine her identity. A ring and a watch were located at the scene, and as for the skeletal remains, there was no signs of homicidal violence. Due to the suspicious circumstances, the Millard County Sheriff's Office opened a homicide investigation. Then in 1984, Henry Lee Lucas claimed he was responsible for Sandra's death. At one point, Lucas claimed he was responsible for more than 100 murders across the United States and was considered one of the nation's most prolific serial killers. An investigation later determined that Lucas was only responsible for a handful of murders and had lied about the rest. He would later recant the majority of crimes he claimed to have committed. In 2013, a Salt Lake City homicide detective was reassigned to the case and determined Sandra was still missing. In hopes of getting more information, he would add Sandra to 2 national databases for missing persons and conduct follow-up investigations. What he found out from the investigations is that Sandra's family believed Warren was responsible for her disappearance and death, but he had died in California in 1999, taking with him any information he possibly had. In 2019, Sandra was entered as a cold case missing person into Utah's cold case database, as well as a federal database that helps law enforcement identify and locate people responsible for violent crimes. Also in 2019, during an episode of the Cold Case Talk podcast by the Utah Cold Case Coalition, they were discussing the Millard County Jane Doe, and someone came up with the idea that the Jane Doe could be Sandra. They realized that the Jane Doe was found with a ring and had no natural teeth, which was similar to the 1979 Missing Persons Report, which said that Sandra has no natural teeth and her ring was missing along with her. The Millard County Sheriff's Office would contact the Salt Lake City Police Department after they found a case file describing the same link as the podcast had identified. In December of 2019, Utah's forensic anthropologist completed a report which allowed the Millard County Sheriff's Office to submit the bones to the University of North Texas for DNA testing in October of 2020. The Sheriff's Office received confirmation on August 10, 2021, that the remains were those of Sandra. Although the state medical examiner could not determine a cause of death, investigators, like the family, believe her husband likely had more information on the case. However, there was never any probable cause to charge him. To date, this is the oldest missing persons cold case closed by the Salt Lake City Police Department. The Millard County Sheriff's Office also announced in August of 2021 that they were finally closing the homicide investigation into her death. After 42 years of being known only as the Millard County Jane Doe, Sandra Louise Hames Matott got her name back. She was born on June 27, 1942 in Wyoming and married a man with the surname Timmons, and the couple had a daughter which would sadly die in 2016. In 1968, Sandra married Larry Bray and they divorced 2 years later. Soon after is when she married Warren Matott. She spent most of her adult life in California, but it is unclear how and when she relocated to Utah. Several months before she vanished, she was arrested by the Salt Lake City PD, but it is unclear what the charges were. She wore upper and lower dentures, which she did not have on her when she was found deceased. Her son, Daryl Hames, was 19 years old when she went missing, and he had younger sisters at the time. He said he now has closure, and his family plans to update the marker they had made for his mother, and his sisters will decide what to do with her ashes. Leslie McCray was born April 14, 1968, and lived in Jacksonville, Florida. She was described as having a wonderful sense of humor and enjoyed pulling pranks. At the age of 17, she was a student at the University of North Florida and living in an apartment off St. John's Avenue in the Avondale area. Around 3 a.m. on the morning of Christmas Eve in 1985, her boyfriend woke up and found a man kneeling by the bed with a knife. He tied up her boyfriend's hands and feet with neckties and then kidnapped Leslie, taking her out the back door of the apartment. Her boyfriend eventually freed himself and called the police. 3 hours later, her body was found on Old Middleburg Road near a power substation, about 5 miles from her home. Police were a little skeptical of the boyfriend's story because there was no sign of forced entry or a struggle, and the back door had cobwebs. With a lack of evidence against the boyfriend and no other suspects or persons of interest, the case would go cold. In 2019, Leslie's family reached out to the nonprofit organization Project Cold Case and the Jackson County Cold Case Unit to request that her case be re-examined using new forensic technology. DNA led investigators to an inmate in Michigan by the name of David Nelson Austin, who has been serving a life sentence since 1991 for 2 unrelated sexual assault cases. DNA was again collected to confirm he was the suspect in Leslie's death. A warrant was issued charging 59-year-old Austin with second-degree murder before he was indicted in August of 2021 on the first-degree murder charge, 36 years after the murder. He is also charged with 2 counts of armed kidnapping and 1 count of armed sexual battery. Currently, the state attorney's office is working to extradite Austin to Florida to stand trial for Leslie's death. Even though Austin has not been convicted of the crime, Leslie's family is relieved to finally have some answers on what happened to their daughter all those years ago on that fateful Christmas Eve.